Quick question. If you could choose one villain to protect you while a main character attacked you, which two would you pick? They can be from any manga or anime. Let me know your answer in the comments below. Anyway, on to the video. Like all their predicaments in L.A.G, Jeong stepped forward to resolve it. Who else could do it if not him? Dwayne was too smooth-brained to handle such complex situations, and Kara couldn't even be trusted to keep her cheeks consistent, let alone deal with this. Thus, our boy wisely stepped up and sent out his skelly Chad to scout the way. The poor fellow was all too familiar with its expendable nature by now, so it quietly went forward. After walking for a bit, the fog completely consumed it, and it disappeared from the trio's view. Though they hadn't seen what happened, it didn't take a genius to guess the fucker was cooked, and most likely, it wouldn't be coming back. Jeong's action of recalling his shattered bones further confirmed this point. After mulling it over for a bit, Jeong decided to head inside solo. If the lightning fog was too much for the skelly Chad to endure, then it fell on him to stake it out. Obviously, the duo opposed this idea. They deemed it too dangerous, and instead suggested finding a different route to test out. But Jeong rejected their proposal. First of all, he had the lightning skill, and with its effect, he might be able to endure the lightning storm in the fog. Secondly, who's to say the door they'd been looking for wasn't in the fog? Wouldn't it be stupid if they detoured around it only to fuck themselves in the process? No matter the case, this was something he had to do. Kara understood his reasons, but she couldn't help but raise her concerns. She was truly getting a bad feeling from the fog. She confessed that her feelings had never been wrong. Ever since she was a kid, she'd always had a sixth sense about such things, and more often than not, she would be right. In fact, the tragic mystery of her disappearing cheeks had been foreseen by her, and she also knew things would change for the better soon. Jeong gently patted her head to reassure her. He told her not to worry too much, he'd be fine. He was Jeong motherfucking Hyeok. At the very least, he possessed the ability to protect himself, no matter what he faced inside. As for her prediction of her cheeks returning, he could already see them, and gyat damn. Them cheeks were really cheeking at this moment. Though he was reluctant, he forcibly peeled his eyes from the baddie and headed into the fog. As he walked, the worried voices of the duo reached him, telling him to be careful. Kara even said she'd be waiting for him, meaning it wasn't completely hopeless for our virgin Chad. If things aligned for him, then he might just get some cheeks in the future. Fingers crossed. Speaking of the baddie, she worriedly asked Dwayne if Jeong would be alright. Dwayne reassured her. If it was Jeong, then he was sure he'd be okay. The dude was just built different, and he doubted anything would stop him. As the two conversed, the scene switched to Jeong, the subject of Dwayne's glaze. Just like he'd expected, Jeong hadn't faced any difficulties yet, and the task was more like a leisurely walk to him at this point. However, whether or not that would continue to be the case was unclear. Jeong had the electric man and pain relief passive skills, so he was confident he could endure the lightning storm somehow. But for how long, even he didn't know. Well, he was going to give it his all anyway, so there wasn't much point in overthinking it. He immediately braced for impact, letting the lightning storm consume him soon after. When the storm struck, all of Jeong's past bravado completely disappeared. He wailed like a little bitch, forced onto his knees almost immediately. Whatever pain he thought he'd feel, this was way worse. In fact, it was so bad Jeong started to doubt L.A.G. Was this because he had a baddie and some glossy cheeks waiting for him? Because who else but the hating author would punish him to this degree? Well, even if it was him, this alone couldn't shake his resolve. He immediately exerted himself, slowly rising to his feet. Because of his passive skills, his body was slowly but surely adapting to the storm, and it wouldn't be long until he conquered it. And so, with that in mind, Jeong slowly walked forward, delving deeper and deeper into the fog. After seemingly an eternity of pain, he finally walked out of the fog, finding himself on the opposite side of the hall. The first thing he did was assess his situation, and to his shock, he realized that he'd powered up. Because of his electric man skill, the storm was like a supercharger to him. It further buffed his abilities, giving him unprecedented power. The only shame was that the buff was temporary, and he could only use it once before it completely disappeared. Even so, this was still a significant advantage, and Jeong couldn't help but feel more reassured about his incoming scout. After walking for a bit, a noteworthy change finally appeared before Jeong. It was another door, similar to the one that brought them to that section of the labyrinth. He wasted no time, instantly entering through the door. What met him was another dark hallway, this one way darker than the last. In the depths of the shadows, several obscured figures reigned, quietly whispering amongst themselves. Jeong immediately went on high alert. He activated his owl eyes, finally getting a clear view of the room. All around him were those weird naked freaks, the same nudist bastards as Derek, chest to nuts. As he noticed them, the nudist colony also noticed Jeong, and their whispers instantly shifted to discussing him. They brought up the fact that Jeong had managed to arrive there while still intact. Evidently, he had a lightning skill to deal with the fog lightning storm. But so what? He was still going to die there, and there wasn't much he could do about it. The leader of the nudists initiated contact. She asked Jeong why he was staying quiet even after seeing them, but Jeong ignored her. He instead focused on what the nudists had been whispering about. From their short discussion, he deduced that the reason the bastards were charred black was because of the lightning storm. As for what the exact details were, he still had no idea. He then asked his own question, inquiring whether he'd find the Minotaurus if he proceeded forward. The black-faced motherfuckers collectively laughed at his question, finding it hilarious. Their leader, Glenn Ryder, responded to Jeong's question. She told him that the boss's room was indeed ahead, but whether or not he'd find the boss inside the room was unknown. Jeong nodded to her reply before asking another question. Were they still human? Glenn responded rather smugly. Of course they were human. It's just that they were an evolved species of humans. They were faster, stronger, felt no pain, and most importantly, if you could overlook the black face, then they were naked walking fan service for all to enjoy. The only limitation, which wasn't actually a disadvantage in their books, was that they had an insatiable desire to consume flesh, specifically human flesh. So, him walking in there was like a lucky turn for them, almost like he'd personally delivered himself to be devoured. Jeong snickered at her comment before replying. First of all, if there was anyone who was lucky, then it had to be him and the homies watching this video, because how often would they get a chance to see some anime boobies and nippies? And secondly, it seemed she didn't know who he was. He was the big dog, MILF hunting, Jeong motherfucking Hyeok. The only thing he came to deliver was their deaths. Glenn said bet to his bold words before commanding the nudist colony to attack. And as expected from these barbaric fuckers, they were all cheeks out as they charged at our boy. Jeong responded in kind. He immediately activated his limitation form, urging the bastards to come at him. Since they were fiends who confessed to loving human meat, especially his meat, he didn't need to hold back against them. He would clap them all, specifically this bastard who decided to flash a lot more than just cheeks. Pause. As the cheeky fuckers charged at him, Jeong entered his karate, whoop-ass fighting stance. He channeled his left-right goodnight, lightning punch, driving his fist into the nudist's face. The blow was so powerful that its eye burst out before it was yeeted into the sky. Obviously, its partners didn't take this lying down. They charged at Jeong from the left, the right, and even from above, successfully completing a three-way pincer attack. But Jeong wasn't flustered. He gathered his energy before shooting it all out, sinking the entire room into his lightning domain. Wherever the bolt struck, chaos reigned, zapping the living shit out of the nudists. However, despite the CHADY display, the bastards weren't that easy to deal with. Only a single nudist suffered lethal damage, while the rest just tanked it. Even though they'd be dazed for a while, it wouldn't affect the general battle much. Jeong immediately noticed this and went on high alert. He identified the black color on the nudist's skin as the true cause of their survival. From his analysis, the color wasn't just a convenient effect for the author to hide the good stuff. It also served as an insulator, protecting the naked folk from lightning. Since things had turned out like that, Jeong instantly changed his fighting style. He switched to the in-your-face bitch slap and cheek slash instead of ranged lightning strikes. With the choice made, Jeong immediately acted on it. He sidekicked the hell out of the first nudist, sending it flying like a broken kite. One of the nudists capitalized on this moment to launch a sneak attack, but Jeong easily dodged that sly hoe. He responded with a vertical slash, aiming straight for its skull. Though the attack landed and dealt significant damage, it was still pointless, because the bastard had purposely sacrificed its arm, saving its life and stalling Jeong in the process. If he continued to fight at this tempo, he'd soon be swarmed and jumped. His defeat wouldn't be surprising afterward. Jeong realized this and changed his fighting style again. This time, he went for the punch-a-bitch no jutsu, yeeting the crap out of a nudist. For the rest of the charging bastards, he yelled at them to come at him. There was plenty of ass where that whoop came from. And he meant it too, because he immediately dished out 2 killer crosses, clocking 2 bastards in the jaw. Unfortunately, his momentum was disrupted by a sneak attack from the back, causing him to groan in pain. In fact, if it wasn't for his absurd passive skills, he might have fractured his spine from that blow. Luckily, he was him, and he instantly recovered, countering with a forehead block. The attacking nudist was caught off guard by such an odd move, leaving it open for a counterattack. Jeong didn't waste this opportunity and directly shoved his fist into the fucker's mouth. He channeled his electricity and burst its head, sending chunks of flesh flying like a squashed tomato. Another foe closed in for a sneak attack, but Jeong instantly responded, bitch slapping the hell out of it. He then followed up with a sweep attack before finishing it off with a stomp to the head. As he was busy dealing with the first nudists, another one pulled up behind him again, going for yet another sneak attack. This time, however, things were different. Jeong's danger sense suddenly flared, warning him of an impending calamity. He didn't hesitate or question it, just dived to the side to dodge. Luckily, he did, because the attack turned out to be so powerful that literal shockwaves were heard from the force. When Jeong saw this, he immediately opened his second door of limitation. The new nudist was obviously different from the rest, and playing around wouldn't do him any good. He first stepped on its foot before cocking his hand back for a killer uppercut. Because its leg was trapped, the fiend didn't fly away, but instead remained firmly within Jeong's grasp. Our boy didn't hesitate to give it the Wayne Brady treatment, firmly choking that hoe. And since he was him, he ruthlessly tore off its neck, taking a chunk of flesh as his battle spoils. Surprisingly, even though its neck was torn off, the bastard didn't immediately die. It first glazed our boy, telling him he was hella strong. The rest of the colony saw their leader fall and immediately went into a frenzy. They charged at Jeong with madness, disregarding their own lives. However, before they could send themselves to their doom, a loud voice called for them to retreat. And although reluctant, they all pulled back. Jeong was left alone in the middle, and honestly, he looked like shit. When Jeong saw them retreating, he flashed an evil smile. His face was particularly demonic, with the blood trickling down like tears. The nudists witnessed this and became enraged. Did this Jeong bastard really think they were afraid of him? They collectively charged forward, disregarding their orders to retreat. Jeong smiled even broader at this. This was exactly what he wanted. He immediately summoned back his bone blade, making a wide slash around him. When the dust settled, we realized that the slash wasn't just to farm some aura. Our boy had actually extended his bone blade, cutting through the encirclement of nudists like butter. The slash was so devastating that several limbs were cut in the process, the nudists forever maimed as a consequence. Glen's heart bled at this loss. She bellowed at the colony to retreat, this time her voice leaving no room for defiance. The nudists wisely listened and backpedaled, putting as much distance as they could between themselves and Jeong. When she saw her colony was safe, Glen heaved a sigh of relief before addressing Jeong once again. She asked him to join them. He was to abandon his humanity and become a nudist like them. She promised the change would be extremely beneficial to him, an improvement in strength being just the basics. But Jeong instantly shot her down. He had no desire to crawl on walls and eat humans, let alone be butt-naked and flash his cheeks across the manhwa panels. If he did that, then the Chad Not would have a hard time saying pause after every scene, which, in truth, would be quite a chore. However, if he were being honest, the boost in their physical characteristics was indeed quite tempting. If he took her up on that offer, who knows how many inches he'd gain as a result. Pause. Glen sighed at his refusal before saying something about food, but honestly, I couldn't care less because my full focus was on them melons and nippies. Damn, holy melons. Luckily, Jeong wasn't as thirsty as I was. He fully focused on Glen, racking his brain to figure out an escape plan. It wasn't that he was afraid of them. On the contrary, he was quite confident he could clap any of them in a one-on-one duel. However, the current situation wouldn't allow that. The bastards would definitely swarm him, and their numbers were too many for him to launch an effective counterattack. There was always the option of opening the third limitation door, but Jeong quickly ruled out that idea. The backlash and unknown consequences were too severe for him to casually make that move. So long as he wasn't forced to, he wouldn't make that choice. Jeong then thought about his other options, one of them being retreating to the lightning storm to recharge. However, this idea was also eliminated. If he did that, then there was a huge possibility he'd draw the enemy with him and implicate Dwayne and Kara in the process. Dwayne was okay. He could go die as far as he was concerned. But Kara couldn't die. She'd promised him some cheeks after all. If great wars could be fought because of cheeks, why couldn't he sacrifice his life for the same? That was just pure logic. Well, more like CHADY logic. With so many ideas ruled out, Jeong was left in an awkward situation. He didn't know what to do, and Glenn was also adding pressure to the situation by commanding her soldiers to attack. If it wasn't for her glorious peaks and nippies, then Jeong would be hella upset with her. Too bad she held the visual advantage in this case. Just when his situation was at rock bottom and his demise was proving inevitable, an idea suddenly struck Jeong. He ignored the charging nudists and locked all the fuck in. When the first nudist lunged at him, his aura suddenly turned dark. So dark that the limitation demonic aura was nothing in comparison. Official debut, the madness skill had finally been unleashed. While under the effects of madness, the whole world seemed to have slowed down before Jeong. The nudists were moving so slow it was almost like they were toying with him. But Jeong knew this wasn't a game. He also knew the nudists weren't slow at all. It was his speed that was ridiculously fast. In fact, he was so fast that bitch slapping and Brady choking the nudists wouldn't be a challenge to him. With this realization, Jeong immediately started his counterattack. He first grabbed the leading nudist, breaking its arm in the process. He then grabbed its face, flashed a sadistic smile, before ripping that fucker clean off. Just when I thought he couldn't get more savage, Jeong actually threw the face, yeeting another nudist in the face with it. He followed up with a lunge before karate chopping the shit out of the second nudist. Under the might of his blow, the poor fellow lost its eye, the bastard popping right off. A third nudist used that chance to strike back, kicking Jeong straight in the jaw. But Jeong easily tanked that shit, launching his counterattack immediately after. He grabbed the fool's leg before punching straight through its skull. Yes, I shit you not. Our boy straight up punched through a skull. Talk about aura. The rest of the nudists saw this and doubled their assault. It was obvious how livid they were. But again, Jeong wasn't flustered. He simply grabbed his third victim and threw it at them, playing a real-life version of whack-a-bitch, whack-a-mole. Unfortunately, his long session of aura farming finally came to an end with Glenn's ambush. And just like her name, she rode that heel deep into Jeong's spine. Or maybe it was his ass. It was hard to tell from this angle. However, from how his legs were curled up like that, I'm leaning towards the latter. She then comboed the assault, kicking the hell out of our boy. Jeong instantly found himself in quite a pathetic situation. Not only was his ass getting whooped, but he also couldn't get an opening to counterattack, meaning this ass whooping was going to last for a while. But even if that was the case, it wasn't like he was completely helpless. Though Glenn's speed was absurdly high, so high that he couldn't quite keep up, he could still follow her movements with his eyes. If he used that fact and predicted her actions, then it wasn't hard to counter. Just like this. Gotcha, bitch. He grabbed hold of Glenn, scaring the shit out of the latter. With his sadistic smile still radiating, Jeong tightened his grip, breaking Glenn's arm like a twig. The overwhelming pain sent the black baddie into a frenzy. She responded with an upper kick, clocking Jeong straight in the jaw. But our boy didn't relent. He exerted more force, yanking Glenn's arm from her body. Before the baddie could scream, Jeong clasped her mouth, then her face, before lifting her into the air. Through CHADY dominance, he slammed that hoe into the ground, crushing the whole floor in the process. Jeong smiled at this massacre, but deep down, he was hella anxious. This wasn't him. He'd completely lost himself to the skill, and currently, even his body wasn't under his control. If he couldn't snap himself back, then there was a huge possibility he might just die there. Damn it, L.A.G, just how many traps do you have? As Jeong was still cursing the hellish game, his hand instinctively pressed harder on Glenn's neck, firmly choking that hoe. And contrary to what I was expecting, the bitch actually died, leaving behind her soul and, of course, a quick peek at them cheeks. Jeong sighed regretfully at the concealing paint before shifting his focus to the rest of the nudists. If the Chads watching couldn't get a clear view of Glenn's plot, then he might as well compensate them by clapping some nudists' cheeks. Luckily, the bastards had fallen into chaos after losing their leader, so stomping on them wouldn't be much of a challenge to him. He immediately acted on this, charging forward with the momentum of a crazed beast. The first to feel his wrath was nudist number, who gives a fuck, who instantly got cleaved in half, his innards scattered across the labyrinth floor. Jeong then pounced on the second and third nudists, decapitating one and ripping the throat of the other. He then turned to the next nudist, digging his claws into its guts and pulling out its innards. When even that wasn't enough to satiate his frenzy, he lunged at the next nudist, ripping out its tongue. Just like a crazed fiend, Jeong continued his massacre, blood and flesh chunks continuously littering the ground. When the last of the nudists fell, he raised his head and roared, venting out the darkest of his carnage desires. All around him were the mangled corpses of the nudists, most of them maimed beyond recognition, and the culprit for this massacre just stood there, idly enjoying the bloodshed. You might be fooled into thinking he was contemplating his actions, but in truth, he'd already forgotten about them. Instead, he focused on how he could effectively use the souls. Though it was sad they'd been killed and forgotten so easily, this was L.A.G. Expecting compassion from this hell was pure lunacy. And unfortunately, the lunacy extended not just to the nudists, but to Jeong as well. Since the madness skill was still in effect, Jeong found himself charging for the door, his own wishes be damned. The crazed look and bloodlust were all his consciousness needed to realize what his body was planning. The mad fool was going after Dwayne and Kara. It seemed the madness hadn't had enough carnage, and was thus targeting the squad. Jeong instantly knew this was a problem, but he was helpless to resolve it. While under the effect of madness, his body was not in his control, so he couldn't stop even if he wanted to. Although he cried bitterly inside, he already knew he would be the cause of Dwayne's and Kara's deaths, likely ripping them to pieces. But who was he? He was Jeong Hyeok. How could he give up so easily? How could he lose to a mediocre skill? He immediately locked in, wrestling for control of his legs. With that as a foundation, Jeong controlled his lower body, finally putting an end to his charge. Through gritted teeth, he held on with all his might before eventually ridding himself of the madness effect. After a series of deep breaths, Jeong acknowledged his good luck for once. If he hadn't been nearing the end of the madness skill, he wouldn't have been able to hold on, and who knows what might have happened to Dwayne and Kara. Luckily, the situation was salvaged, and he could still collect the glossy cheeks Kara promised him. As he walked back to the nudist's room, Jeong reflected on the intricacies of the madness skill. Although it was undoubtedly overpowered, he decided not to use it casually unless he was truly at death's door. Such a skill was too risky, especially since he had his squad with him. Locking back in, Jeong leisurely collected the souls from the nudists, and thanks to their generous donations, he now had a whopping 370 souls to spare. He giddily pocketed all the souls, even entertaining the thought of sharing some with Dwayne and Kara. Dwayne wasn't all that important, but how would Kara react? Would she introduce him to her brother, Hawk 2, as thanks? Or maybe her sister, Gawk 3000? Both cases would be fine, and honestly, he'd take anything at this point. Following Jeong's glare, the thirsty narrator refocused on the story. He shifted his attention to the dark hallway, a lone door hidden in its depths. Jeong quickly approached the door before cautiously heading inside. When he did, a system notification popped up announcing that he'd entered the main room of the labyrinth. Jeong ignored the notification as he silently studied the room. To his shock, he discovered the room had an uncanny resemblance to the starting point of L.A.G, the very same room that had started this shit. Even though he was shaken, he quickly calmed down before looking for the familiar lever hidden in the wall. Pressing it opened a secret door, just like in the starting room. With zero hesitation, Jeong walked into the light, slowly entering the crystal room. As he scanned the familiar sight, another notification sounded, informing him that he could morph into a labyrinth resident in that room. As for who the residents were, they were obviously the nudists. The process was simple. All he had to do was place his hand on the terminal, and the system would handle the rest. If he did that, then he'd receive all the perks of the nudists, and then some. Jeong mulled it over as he slowly unraveled the mysteries of the transformation. From his deduction, he realized that all his accumulation, his skills, and souls would be traded in for the passive skill Labyrinth Man. It was this skill that gave the fucker nudists the abilities they had. Were he to accept, he would evolve into a being more suited for darkness, while his grade and characteristics would be determined by his accumulation. At level 3, he wouldn't be able to walk or talk, just like the fallen Derek Chestnut. At level 4, he'd be just like Clint, barely able to talk while significantly stronger than level 3. At level 5, he'd be like Glenn, stronger than level 4 and able to communicate fluently. Of course, he wouldn't have the holy melons and cakes Glenn had, but that's neither here nor there. As for levels above 5, he was sure they existed, but the system didn't share details about them. Thinking back to the nudists, Jeong realized they already knew the exit's location. It was just that they couldn't defeat the Minotaur, so they were forced to stay there. From their actions, he deduced that the bastards were probably biding their time, hunting new arrivals, and leveling up their nudist skill with hopes of defeating the Minotaur in the future. Too bad all their plans and preparations went belly up because of him. But if that was the case, how did the bastards get their resistance to lightning? Was that also a part of their transformation? This question stumped Jeong, and he couldn't figure it out no matter how hard he thought about it. Luckily, he didn't have to sweat too much, as L.A.G easily gave him an answer. The solution was insulator paint. It would protect the user from electricity if sprayed all over the body. Turns out the nudists weren't just doing so to hide the cheeks. The black paint had tactical significance all along. Of course, just because it's tactical doesn't mean we can overlook its heinous crimes. Do you know how many times I zoomed in on them cheeks to no avail? Someone has to answer for that, and I'm blaming this stupid paint. Jeong also got heated after receiving the paint, but his focus was on something else entirely. He realized that Dwayne and Kara would also be able to cross the lightning fog if they used the paint, but that was only secondary. What was truly important was that Kara had to be butt naked to use the paint, not to mention the nosebleed sight of her covered in spray. If things turned out well, both he and the homies watching this might just get the feast of a lifetime. Itadakimasu. With that glorious view in mind, Jeong resolutely headed back. How could he afford to waste time at such an important moment? He quickly left the crystal room, running back to the oblivious Kara. As he ran, he reflected on his journey in L.A.G so far. Initially, his goal was to survive and escape L.A.G, but things were different now. Not only did he want to escape, he also wanted to bring Kara and Dwayne with him. Escaping alone wasn't enough for him anymore. He wanted to save the duo and get the hell out of there together. Sure, it was going to be hard as fuck, but he was Jeong motherfucking Hyeok. He'd make it work somehow. Just as he was in high spirits, L.A.G spawned in to remind him what kind of place this was. It was hell, and such bitchy ideas wouldn't be tolerated. Before him was a ruined and bloody battlefield, an obvious indication that some shit had definitely happened to the duo. Jeong's heart sank at the sight, and he couldn't help but yell out Kara's name. Damn it, L.A.G. If something happens to her before he collects his owed cheeks, I won't forgive you. Jeong ignored the narrator's pointless banter and rushed forward. As far as he was concerned, Not's thirsty behavior came second. What was truly important was finding his crew. He looked around the room, calling out Dwayne and Kara's names, but what answered him were mere echoes. The duo was nowhere to be seen. An overwhelming feeling of anger and panic assaulted Jeong, and he couldn't help but punch the ground to vent his emotions. Damn it. What was this development? He'd just vowed to escape with the duo. Was he going to fail even before he started? What kind of shit luck was this? He didn't know who or what was responsible for this, whether they were a group or a solo unit. But one thing was for certain. He would kill them all. He would make sure they regretted ever laying their dirty hands on his crew, especially his baddie, Kara. Damn it. He hadn't even held her hand yet. Was he really destined to die a tragic virgin in this game? He hoped the fuck not. Calming his wild heart, Jeong quickly used a skill to regain his composure. I would have mentioned the exact name of the skill, but I'm pretty sure it's not self-composure, as mentioned in the translation. In fact, I'm so confident I could bet my left nut and Dwayne's right titty that it's not that. The translators are just doing whatever they want at this point. Anyway, after using the definitely not self-composure skill, Jeong finally regained some clarity. This wasn't the time to lose himself in rage. It would only blind him and cause him to make mistakes. He needed to be calm. Only then would he be able to pick up the duo's trail and save them, if it was possible. With that in mind, Jeong quickly scanned the battlefield, doing his best to scour every inch of it. Thanks to his attention to detail, he quickly found valuable clues to pursue. One of them was smoke from Kara's fire skill. Another was wreckage from Dwayne's roar skill. Both were still fresh, so the duo must have left just recently. From the traces and the other clues, the signs pointed to them retreating into the lightning fog. However, if that was true, then things didn't bode well for them. Ignoring the ever-deepening pit in his gut, Jeong continued his investigation into the lightning fog. After a bit of tracking, he found the duo's traces, but they disappeared just as quickly as they appeared. With the limited info he had, there was no way of telling what had happened, but if the duo had been forced into the lightning without the paint to protect them, then their demise was proving all the more likely. Although it was sad to think about, there was indeed a high probability of that happening, so denying it was just pure ignorance. However, even if he was the most ignorant person alive, he decided to trust in the squad and ignore the clues. So what if the signs were clear? He was willing to bet his squad wouldn't die so easily. Forget Kara, because the mortality rate of baddies in L.A.G was horrendous. His hopes mainly lay in Dwayne. The giant unit was definitely him, so surviving shouldn't be a problem. And if he looked out for a brother and saved his baddie, then that would be even better. With renewed hope and a calmer heart, Jeong immediately returned to the crystal room. Since he was betting on his squad's survival, he had to do his part to survive as well. And the first thing was to clap the Minotaur. After finding and activating the hidden switch in the wall, Jeong watched calmly as the trapdoor activated, opening up a path to the boss room. Although he was itching for a glorious fight, he wasn't stupid. He also knew moving forward without Dwayne and Kara would be hella hard, so caution was necessary. The first thing he needed to do was calm himself and level up. Only then would he have a chance of survival. Thus, he quickly burned through his souls, leveling up a shit ton of skills. You can pause the video to get the exact details because ain't no way I'm reading all that shit. However, as compensation, feel free to imagine me nibbling on your ear. I'm sure that'll make the reading more pleasurable. You're welcome. After bawling the hell out and going on his leveling spree, Jeong successfully upgraded his skills, leaving only 7 souls as backup. With his preparations complete, he resolutely walked into the boss's room, ready to clap some Minotaur cheeks. However, as typical of L.A.G, things wouldn't be so simple. The moment he entered the room, the door immediately closed, blocking any routes for retreat. Not only that, he realized he wasn't the only person in the room. In fact, there were so many people, you'd think they were holding a party or something. Most of them were cool, with killer character designs, but some were just fucked up. Seriously, what in the Zuckerberg is this? With so many new arrivals and so much info to digest, Jeong almost missed the dead Minotaur on the floor. Turns out the boss was already dead, so his trip was for naught. But if that was the case, how come the system hadn't announced the mission's completion? Was there still something cooking in the background, or was L.A.G up to its shenanigans again? Just as he was pondering this point, a figure broke out of the group and silently approached him. He called out to Jeong, yelling that he reeked of blood. This nosy bastard was Jeremy Stone, who, like his name, had them stony abs. His public attribute was an increase in his sense of smell, and currently, his highest skill level was 22. Jeremy went on to question Jeong, asking why he reeked of blood. In fact, his scent was even worse than his own, and he was already a certified lunatic. But Jeong didn't answer. Instead, he raised his vigilance. Since Jeremy went through the trouble of closing the distance, he must be a close-range specialist. And adding that to his constant bullshit yapping, it was clear the bastard wanted some smoke. But to think he would so casually approach him alone. Just how confident was he in his skills? 2 more members broke out of the group, silently reinforcing Jeremy. One of them told him to cut his shit. This was L.A.G. Everyone reeked of blood in that hell. But Jeremy was adamant. He insisted that Jeong's stench was on another level. In fact, it was almost like he'd soaked in a pool of blood before coming there. Not to mention his highest skill level, 30. That wasn't a number that could be reached by ordinary means. Without a doubt, this Jeong bastard was one hell of a freak. The lizard motherfucker took this chance to approach Jeong. He directly extended an invitation, asking Jeong to join them. The other reinforcement quickly rejected the idea. He explained that the group was already in chaos. Most of them were already trying to kill each other. Adding Jeong would only make things worse. Jeremy countered his argument, insisting that it would be fine. And if he was referring to the time he had almost killed him, then that was already in the past. He should go ahead and forget it. Hadn't he apologized enough already? The headband bastard became enraged by his nonchalant attitude. He called Jeremy a coward, a real scam to call a teammate. Jeremy told him to cut the bullshit. He then said some racist shit, but I'm in no mood to translate as bullshit. The two instantly became heated, charging toward each other soon after. Just as they were about to clash, a third person joined the fray, perfectly blocking the two. He chastised them for being reckless, especially since they had a troublesome guest before them. Jeong also studied this foe, noting that he was hella fast. To be able to move with such speed, the bastard must have an acceleration skill or something. But if that was the case, did the skill affect only his movements? Or could he dish out speedy thrusts like the Flash? Pause. After being stopped, Jeremy instantly became a diss buffet, dishing out disses like crazy. Everyone became victims of his strays, and the whole group descended into madness. The commotion continued until the lizard Zuckerberg called for them to shut it. He warned Jeremy to watch himself. There was a limit to his tolerance and generosity. Jeremy instantly cowered, apologizing soon after. His face might be troubling, but it seemed this lizard fucker was the real deal. The only maiden in the group spoke up at that time. She called the men a bunch of idiots. How could they argue with a possible enemy before them? She was Morgane Doubled, and I'm sure if she removed the mask, my schlong would doubled in an instant. Currently, her highest skill level was 26. Jeong watched the madness before dissing the group. They were really a mess. Well, even if they were a train wreck, it had nothing to do with him because there was no way in hell he'd join them anyway. Jeremy heard Jeong's condescension and immediately got heated. He mad-dogged Jeong, asking what gave him the confidence to speak so brazenly. Jeong told him to cut the chit-chat. If he wanted smoke, then they should get on with it. Jeremy responded with, "Bet." He indeed wanted that smoke. Jeong told him, "Cool." That was exactly what he wanted as well. He'd been feeling rather awful lately, and a target to vent his frustration on was exactly what he needed. Since Jeremy had so generously volunteered to get smoked, he'd graciously accept and tear that ass up. No homo, of course. Jeremy involuntarily took a step back at Jeong's words. He'd known L.A.G was a harsh place, but who would have thought his delicate ass would be at risk as well? If that was the direction of this fight, then he might as well stop. He'd leave that sort of thing to Diddy. Jeong smiled at his tense face. It was exactly as he thought. More often than not, the loudest people were the most cowardly. If Jeremy was really about that smoke, he wouldn't be talking so much. He would have attacked immediately. Talking meant he was a coward, and cowards tended to die quickly in L.A.G. The rest of the party heard his words and didn't dispute them. On one hand, they were really tired of this Jeremy bastard. On the other hand, they were wary of Jeong, and sacrificing Jeremy to probe his abilities was a worthwhile trade in their books. So what if Jeremy died? It had nothing to do with them. In fact, it would be better for them if he did. The only thing they required was for him to draw out Jeong's abilities before he bit the dust. Jeong eyed the group and immediately knew what they were thinking. But so what? Was Jeong Big Papi Hyeok so easy to manipulate? If these fools thought they'd get their way so easily, they were dreaming. He would wreck any schemes they had and kill anyone who dared stand in his way. But first, he should get rid of this Jeremy fucker because he was also getting tired of his nonsense yapping. He easily sidestepped Jeremy's stab, causing the latter's attack to miss pathetically. Jeremy didn't let up. He instead doubled his assault, sending a flurry of stabs at Jeong. Jeong read the attacks and nimbly dodged them all. Such puny attacks weren't a threat to him. He then changed the tempo, clocking Jeremy square in the jaw. The blow left Jeremy dazed, forcing him to activate his trump card. 2 more daggers flew from his pants, joining his offensive. But how could Jeong let him do as he pleased? He rapidly closed in, his fist coated in lightning. With a mighty punch, he tore through Jeremy's jaw, sending the latter flying. Just like that, a cocky bastard fell. His yapping maw mangled beyond repair. Jeong nonchalantly collected his soul before turning to the party. What would they do now? Would they fight, or nah? The group remained silent for a while before this creepy Zuckerberg fucker spoke up. He expressed his nonchalance at Jeremy's death, but that didn't mean they wouldn't do anything about it. Though they hated the fool, he was still part of their group, so revenge was definitely appropriate. However, that was only his opinion. The rest would decide for themselves through a vote. After a bit of back and forth, the group settled for a split decision. Half wanted to attack, while the rest wanted to retreat. Jeong told them not to think too much. They'd get clapped regardless. In fact, his hands were rated E for everyone, so they could all get it. If they were still hesitant, they should just gang up on him. He was down for whatever. Lizardmark eyed him before frowning at his confidence. Since he was being that bold, it meant he was a monster, and such freaks weren't easy to kill. Even if it was possible, he didn't see the need to risk it for just Jeremy, so he wisely stepped back, dispelling any ideas of retaliation. As the two sides settled their dispute, the panel switched to the Minotaur. And just as we've grown to expect from L.A.G, some shit was brewing in the background. The corpse started to squirm before a bloody silhouette burst out from within. This sudden change caught everyone off guard, and they all collectively turned to face the new foe. Jeong, in particular, was getting a really bad feeling from the freak, a feeling that only amplified when he heard the bastard scream. No matter what it was, he knew shit was cooked, and it was about time he got his ass out of there. The new foe, the Burning Man, as the system called it, also studied the group, its eyes shining in amusement. It then locked in, its head setting ablaze. Before the group could react, the fiend lunged forward, grabbing Rushing Man by the face. The group gasped at the absurd speed before quickly backpedaling to save themselves. As for Rushing Man, he was left in the foe's hands, his head slowly setting ablaze. One team member rushed in to save him, stabbing Burning Man in the flank. Unfortunately, he was useless and got caught as well. Under the group's horrified gazes, the duo were killed, their heads reduced to cinders. And the worst part? They were completely helpless. They couldn't do shit to the fiend. Another team member charged forward, striking B-Man in the arm. Because of his bombing skill, the strike was actually effective, managing to sever its arm. But just like the last one, the fool was quickly yeeted, dying pathetically soon after. With 3 bodies to its name, Burning Man slowly walked forward, its domineering aura pressing down on the group. Jeong watched this, and the sickening feeling in his gut got more intense. He instinctively realized, fucking around at this point would instantly get him killed, especially since B-Man seemed to have absurd regeneration as well. No matter the case, now was the time to lock in. He couldn't afford to be careless. With that in mind, he called out to Lizard Mark, inquiring if he had some healing potions. The weird fool replied that he had some. But why was he asking? Jeong replied that it was obvious. He was going to clap some Burning Man cheeks. If the lizard could give him the potions, then he would help them kill the boss. If not, then they would all die there. The choice was up to him. Oh, and before he decided, he should know. He had some glossy cheeks waiting for him, so he better not fuck around. Pause.